My dad and stepmom tried to kick me out of my house to give it to my stepsister, who is pregnant and spoiled. Her boyfriend left her, so she is in a tough spot. My dad, who is 62, has recently found out how much I earn. He has decided to kick me out of my house, which is surprising. He is doing this in the name of family. My stepsister, who is 29, is also involved. She's never done anything wrong, has somehow managed to get pregnant, and now, with her aspirations of becoming an escort and an OnlyFans model, she's struggling to find a place to stay. My father wants to step in and help, but I'm the one who's ended up footing the bill. I've had to give up my house and the money I've earned from it to this woman, who has made some unfortunate choices. Now, I'm the one my father has openly rejected as a responsibility on multiple occasions. However, since he found out about my new house, he's also brought up the fact that we're the same blood, which is a bit much for me. He's trying to strengthen the bond between me and his wife and daughter, Grandma Ed. She's my dad's kid too, but I was cast away far too early to make any kind of connection with the woman. I'm glad I didn't because I'd be so disappointed. I just want to remind you all that I'm only here to vent my emotions. I have opinions, thoughts, and feelings that I want to write out. They might not sound okay to you, and you may disagree, but I'm just letting you know anyway. I don't have anyone else to tell. Let's introduce Ash, short for Ashlyn, who's my half-sister. She's around 5 years younger than me, and she's making her dad proud. S is delusional. This woman's out there doing nothing but being an escort, sleeping around with a flop. OnlyFans, and my father calls her his pride. Yep, you read that right. I'm guessing he doesn't know the main deal. Who's going to tell him? I'm not very conservative, but I try to focus on my morals and career. I court women when I find time to try and get to know them better. Sometimes there's a spark, but other factors come into play. Sometimes there are other factors at play, like long distance and availability issues. Other times, there's no understanding at all. I try not to sleep with random people. I think I should wait for the right woman. Having a high body count grosses me out. I don't know why guys show it off like it's something to be proud of. Anyway, this is what I apply to my own life. My stepsister is sadly the opposite in opinion. She probably has lost count of her physical partners. Then she's an escort now, where that in itself is just sad. It's also a bit dangerous. Some guys like to do weird stuff to escorts. I don't know how anyone would think it's okay to work like that. She posts inappropriate videos and photos of herself on the internet to make money, but she doesn't get much success. She probably doesn't know how to get the traffic running. For whatever reason, it's a flop. How do I know about it here? My friend told me an embarrassing story. He said that Ash texted him after they met for a drink and asked if he wanted to have fun. I was already a bit heated up because the guy went out with my sister, but he said it was when he didn't know she was my sister. I don't know if he's telling the truth, but he said she'd sent him the link to her page, and he showed it to me too. My sister is always broke and asking my dad for money, so I think it isn't working too well for her. I couldn't bring myself to ask her about it directly, and I never told my dad about it either. Another time, I saw her taking a call and then sitting in the car with an elderly guy. He gave her flowers and they drove off. She would sneak back in the house through the window at odd hours. I noticed this when I used to come home from college for the holidays. I don't know if she's still at it, though. I don't want to be involved in any of it. I have a respected post where I work, and I'm happy about it. Finally, I haven't lived much with a new family since my dad was bothered enough to send me away any chance he got. But I have seen Ash close enough to say that she takes after her mother. Marissa was her. She believed she was quite the icon in her prime. She used to be a flight attendant and was fairly attractive to womanizing males like my dad. Now she's a typical botched-face Karen, if you know what I mean. She manages the neighborhood daycare of sorts with her claw-like hands and nails longer than her lipstick. Parents would leave their kids with Edward Scissorhands like that, and she may poke out a child's eye with those long nails. She's just as pokey as her nails. She has an opinion about everything. She's opinionated and likes to stir up trouble. Her voice is terrible, and she's had more plastic surgery than there are particles in the ocean. She's as genuine as fake leather. She influenced my dad to send me away to boarding school when I was 8 because she didn't want to raise a kid that wasn't hers. Now, let me tell you about my dad. He's kind of the main issue is that my dad thinks he can do no wrong. He's lived a long life and thinks he knows better. He says he regrets having me because I'm nothing like him. Thankfully, I'm not like my mom. She was a strong woman who knew her priorities and took good care of my dad. They fell out because she used to tell me that my dad wasn't a bad person, just a different person. No matter what, he'll always be my dad, and I should never forget that. My mom was a good person. She didn't want me to hate my father. I'm sure he was as unbearable to her as he is today. They separated and divorced a few months later. I was 4 at the time. 2 months after the divorce, my dad married Marissa. They had Ash when I turned 5. Then my mom died in a car crash. I'll never forget it because she was out to come get me from school. She had always been on time, but just once she was 10 minutes late. It seemed like an hour, but it was only 10 minutes. She got hit at an intersection by a drunk driver. He survived, but she didn't. He got a DUI a few years later, and I was left alone forever. I waited in school, and it took them 2 hours to come and get me. I was lied to and confused since my dad had. I'll never forget how annoyed he looked when he turned to Marissa and asked what they should do about me. She said, "Your kid is your problem, Dad. Now you can't come and tell me. I'll have to take care of your spoiled kid. I've worked really hard since I turned 15. I've been managing a few small businesses on the side. I've been earning since after boarding school. I went to college, but I only visited. I've been on my own since 8 a.m. I've put in a lot of effort to get where I am. I recently bought a house. It's a nice little place, much better than the shared apartment I had with my friends. It was a life goal I thought I'd never achieve. I may not like my family enough, but basic decency was to involve them in a moment this big. So I invited them to the housewarming. I also had a housewarming party. My dad's reaction was pretty sad to watch. He looked envious, if I'm being honest. He was also a little annoyed, asking about the furniture, the architect, and the interior designer. I gave him the info I thought he needed, and he responded with taunts like, "I wouldn't know. You never bothered telling me." It was like he was trying to gain attention, making our weak relationship obvious in front of friends and work colleagues, even my boss. A week passed and I got a call from him. I was at work and he said he wanted to meet since it was urgent. I agreed and went home. It was a complex project to manage. He said he wanted to meet since it was urgent, and I agreed. When I got home, I saw Marissa and Ash looking angry. They were in the living room giving me the side eye. My dad was in the kitchen, taking bottles of beer out of the fridge. He offered me one, but I said no because I was worried about what he'd say. I asked him what he wanted me for, and he raised his eyebrows and asked me another question. He wanted to know if I'd finally started giving a damn about us. I frowned in confusion because I didn't understand what he was getting at. He asked me to join Ash and Marissa in the living room. I nodded and went over to a couch across from them and sat down. Ash folded her arms, and Marissa rolled her eyes. Dad walked in and sat with him facing me. He put his beer bottle on the coffee table and leaned back. He then asked me if I were blind. There was a pause, confusion at my end and anger at theirs. Probably before I could respond, he said, adding that it's either I'm blind or I choose not to see things that need to be seen. He said I had probably gotten very proud ever since I got a house and refused to look at the people who actually mean something to me. I sighed and asked him what he meant by all of that and requested that he be more clear. He blew sarcastically and then told me I was unbothered by the serious situation in the room. He said that I didn't see that the family was in trouble. I decided not to offer to help. I asked him what he meant. He looked at Ash, who rolled her eyes and said she was pregnant like any normal person. I wanted to congratulate her, but before I could, she started crying. Marissa hugged her and told me I should know what's going on at home and care enough to ask. Dad said Ash has just found out she's pregnant, and the boy responsible has now broken up with her because of it. Marissa added that Ash has decided to keep it, and that is what we should base further decisions on. I was at a loss for words. I got a death stare from both Ash and Marissa, and honestly, I meant well. I had already assumed that maybe they want me to chip in with money to help her out, and I was genuinely interested in doing so. I was ready to do that, but then my dad stood and walked over to my side and sat down with me. He then said that that was why he called me. He said that he's a good father to his girl, and maybe my mother didn't teach me how to be a good brother, but brothers would give their life away for the comfort of their sisters. I said, I beg your pardon. I know my financial input is needed, but I'm not dying for her. I sighed and asked what he wanted me to do. What can I do about it? He smiled and patted my back, saying, That's my good boy. I gave a fake smile, which disappeared as soon as Dad spoke again. He said, You're giving your house to Ashlyn. No, I'm not. Yes, that's what I said. Dad frowned. He asked me why not. I told him that I could help out with some cash. But the house is mine. I can lend her a room without rent until she can afford to pay for it. Dad and I stood up and argued. He said I had to give her the house and move out to make room for her. I said that Ash couldn't afford the bills and manage the house on her own. Dad said that would be my responsibility. I was furious, but I had to remain respectful. So I got to my feet and told him, Hell to the no. I told him that wasn't possible and that I was leaving. Then I left. He didn't stop there. He showed up at my house a week later while I was at work. I don't know how he got inside or where he got the keys from, but when I came home, I saw men moving boxes outside the house. The boxes were full of my stuff. I hurried inside and asked them what they were doing. They told me the house owner had ordered them to throw that stuff out. I told them to get their stuff back inside and leave immediately. I was pretty upset, but this was the last thing I'd expected to witness coming home to. I went inside to find my dad and Ash, and they were still there, demanding that I do what brothers should do. I told them to leave, but they didn't listen. So Elle told them I'd call the cops on them. That's when they finally left. They badmouthed me using curses and other colorful language. I know this is a lot to read, but it was a lot worse in person. A week has passed, and I kind of feel bad about it. That's why I'm posting here. Was I wrong? I feel like they need me, and I shouldn't cut them off like this. But I also feel like there are limits to what I'm okay doing for them. It angers me how disconnected and unbothered they were about me as I grew up. But now they expect me to do everything for them. To lay my life for them is a bit much, don't you think? Let me know. I can't even involve my friends in this. You're all I have right now. Update. Hey you all. I hope you're well. It's been a week since I posted. I didn't expect it to get the attention it did. I read the comments as they came, and they made me question a lot of things. But I decided not to cut my family off entirely. This was because I got a call from Ash. She said she wanted to meet me, so I said sure. She asked to meet at my house because she wanted to tell me a few things, but I was still recovering from the scene that happened last time. So I said let's meet somewhere else. We went to a coffee shop, and she was pretty uneasy at first. Normally she's pretty arrogant and rude, but she seemed pretty unlike herself. We sat in the corner, and she told me she'd recently been broken up with. I said I had a feeling that, since my dad said the guy who got her pregnant had left her, she'd have a different take. She shook her head and said that's what my dad thinks. I asked her then what it really was, and she told me that my dad thinks her boyfriend left her because he has commitment issues, but that she's the one with the commitment issues. I was pretty surprised. She said that she really cared for this guy, but he'd found out about a few things in regards to her just a few days before she broke it off. He found out she was pregnant when they met. He wanted to confront her about some things, but she spoke first, which made him even angrier. He got pretty crazy in that moment and punched a hole in the wall. She said he scared her. Then he told her he was breaking up with her and left without hearing her response. She's been trying to call him constantly, but he doesn't respond at all. He's only texted her back once, saying that she needs to get rid of he said he'd only speak to her if she got rid of the kid. But she doesn't want to do that. I know Ash isn't perfect, but I don't like this guy. I only asked her what he'd found out, and she said it'd be weird to tell a brother about it. I understood that she was probably talking about the vans and escorting, so I didn't press the issue. She said it was okay if she didn't want to tell me before I could ask her. She took a deep breath and let it out. Then she told me that she'd been involved in some questionable activities. I was worried because I didn't really want to hear the confirmation of all my suspicions, but I did. She told me that she'd wanted to paint and become an artist, But Marissa told her Ash was told that she needed to find herself a man as soon as possible. She started gaining the attention of elderly men, which kind of grossed her out at first. When she told Marissa about it, Marissa told her that that was a good thing. It was indeed the older men that knew what to do with the money they had, and that they were the ones making any money at all. Ash was only 19 at the time. Marissa told her that college wouldn't or couldn't get her a good, comfortable life. Ash had youth, and there were many who would pay for that. She decided she wanted to become a model. She tried and went to many modeling agencies, but none seemed to be interested in her. Then she met a guy in his 40s who told her he could get her a gig. He took her to parties and bought her expensive clothes and jewelry for the events, and she was happy until she was told about her first gig. It turned out she was selling her time to a man in exchange for a modeling gig. She thought it would just be dinner, but it was a night and she spent it. She did get a small modeling gig where she took photos for a small brand, but that was it. A few more men used her while she hoped for a gig in return, but she was told that they didn't select her. She then found out that the guy investing in her was actually profiting off of her. She thought it was unwise to confront him for it because she was afraid he'd have her killed. So she told him that she didn't want to pursue modeling anymore and was okay with minimum wage jobs. Thankfully, he let her go without an issue. She then tried to wait tables at bars, but it was pretty tough for her. That's what hard-earned cash is. For choosing to do those small jobs, she'd tell her that women are the beauty of this world and should only be there to shine and smile like a showpiece. They need to be taken care of, and so on. So Ash started going out with men only for dinner, but she charged for it. She said there were many loners out there who just wanted conversation. That ended up with her dealing with stalkers and obsessive men who thought they were owed more than what they'd paid for. She decided that talking to men and making them feel connected to her was more problematic than sleeping with them, so she started escorting. It worked fine until a friend told her about on the vans. She tried to get it going, but she wasn't really good at handling a camera and editing things. She wasn't social enough, and it required a lot of work, so that didn't work out either. Then she met her boyfriend, who was an ex-co-worker. He worked at a barista and they met again. She liked him a lot, but he was too clingy and a little possessive. He didn't trust her much, and he had every reason to doubt her because she was still working as an escort for vans without his knowledge. She stopped escorting at all the vans completely, and her boyfriend started supporting her financially. She was fine with it, but Marissa wasn't. Then she got pregnant and her boyfriend found out. She has a few men on the list who could be the father. They all chip in with money to support the kid. One of them even proposed to her. She knows they're doing it because they think they're the only one there is, which is ridiculous since they know she's an escort. She doesn't tell them outright that she's an escort and that it pays her bills. It would probably help with the kid. She said she decided to tell me all this. She couldn't tell her dad because he thinks she's only been modeling here and that they're making little money. He also thinks she had one guy in her life who left her when he should have stayed. Marissa knows most of it and suggests Ash marry the guy who proposed and let him think he's the father. But Ash doesn't know what to tell her dad. She also doesn't want to marry the guy because he's weird and old. She wants to let anyone believe a lie. I asked her what I could do to help, and she said that some financial input would be fine. She also wants me to make up with Dad. She said that I should agree to what Dad is asking and then move out for some time. Then I could come back when matters aren't as heated. How's that a solution? I respectfully declined her offer and told her I could only contribute some cash, but I wasn't okay with moving out of my own house. She then told me I was being selfish for thinking like that. She said she had exposed her whole life to me and I didn't have the least bit of decency to help her out. She even said her dad was right about me and I deserved to be sent to an orphanage and not taken in when I needed a place to live. She got up and stomped away. I think my response wasn't too extreme, but is it selfish? What do you think of her side of the story? Is what she's asking for justified? Should I trust her? I feel like she was telling the truth, but does it mean I should do what she's asking for? Let me know if you update this. It's been on my mind for a while. Another week has passed, and a few things have happened. I'd planned to hit the keys and update you on it. Thanks for the support on my previous update. You guys are a great support. For once, anyway. So after I met Ash, I got Dad called to say he wanted to meet at the bar to settle a few things. I was curious, so I agreed and went to meet him. We sat at the counter, and he said he knew how much I was earning. I asked why it mattered, and he said he knew I could afford to buy another house in a few years. I shrugged and told him I already have a house, and this discussion should end. He said I didn't have a family. I also reminded my dad that Ash has been living with them long enough, and that everything seems to be going well. I asked him what would happen if she lived alone in a house while pregnant. I said she needed to be surrounded by people who can take care of her. That's when my dad shocked me once again. He said he and Marissa would move in with Ash in my house. Couldn't believe my ears. Before I could react, the bartender let out a sarcastic chuckle. Dad took offense and asked him what was so funny. Ash said she uses everyone and then throws them away. My dad asked him if he knew who he was talking about. He nodded, saying he was her boyfriend. My eyes widened. This was the guy. Dad balled his fists and spoke sternly. The guy asked him why he thought it was okay to start a family he couldn't support. The guy held his hands up and told Dad that he wasn't responsible for the family in question, and he had no interest in raising a child that was not his own. Dad dared him to explain why he thought that. He smiled and told us that he'd had a vasectomy done last year because he didn't want any kids. But Ash still got pregnant. He found her driving off with after lying to him about where she'd been going. He found out she'd been with another man. When Vance finally found out, he was devastated. He'd always wanted a child, and now he was forced to face the reality that he couldn't have one. He confronted Ash, telling her that she'd been cheating on him the entire time. She ended up spilling the beans. I could only watch as Dad's face shifted from anger to shock. I was shocked and disappointed. As my ears were still pinned to the guy's voice, he shrugged and told us he owed Ash nothing. He said she owed him time, sincerity, and at the very least, love. He didn't know if Dad knew any of it, but he was sure no dad would be proud of a kid like that. Dad tightened his lip and got off the stool without a word and walked away. Later that evening, he texted me to say he had to go pick Marissa up. I don't know what happened after she left her yoga class, but I'm sure it was something. The very next day, I found Ash at my door crying. She told me I ruined everything. I pulled her inside to avoid a scene and calmed her down to tell her that I didn't tell Dad anything. It was her boyfriend who happened to be the bartender where Dad and I had gone. She then told me that Dad told her to quit everything and stay at home. He was really disappointed in her and never thought she'd do something like this. He told her to change her ways and find a good man. He also pointed out that her chances of finding a good man were pretty slim. I listened to her and hugged her. She said she was sorry for thinking it was me because Dad had just come home from meeting me when he confronted her. I forgave her, and then she went back home while she was ranting and telling me about how pathetic she felt. She said Marissa was pretty quiet when Dad was talking about good women and their loyalty. It seemed like she couldn't say anything. I asked her what she meant by that. She said that Marissa couldn't have an opinion since she is yoga. I was confused, but then Ash started crying again and told me what else happened. Yoga HM stuck with me. What do you think really happened? Is Ash going to? I haven't heard from anyone since I've been away. I'll fill you in on what's going on, even though I know you probably didn't expect me to get back to you so soon. I updated just 2 days after my last upload. I'm here for the ones asking. Ash's ex's name is irrelevant, but we can call him Bob. Here's the new bit. The day before yesterday, I went to meet Dad. I told him I'd decided on a few things. I said I wanted to help raise Ash's kid and I was ready to lend a room to her. I said I'd be okay to pay for the diapers and stuff, but she needs to get a job as soon as she can. Dad told me that then there'd be no one with a baby, so Elle suggested she tried freelancing or working from home. Dad wasn't his usual rude self this time. He took a pause and then sighed. He sat down on the couch and told me he thought I hated him. He was right, but I asked him why he thought that. He said it was because Mom hated him too. I quickly told him she never told me that. She always told me Dad loved me and cared about me. I told him that the only reason why I was disappointed at all was how wrong my perception of Dad was. Mom told me all that, and then what I felt from Dad was total neglect and lack of care. He rubbed his eyes and told me he hated himself for a lot of things. He told me he hated himself for a lot of things. He said he liked Mom, but they hadn't known each other long enough to decide if they were actually each other's type. He sighed and said that he got her pregnant, which is why he had to marry her. She was a good wife to him, but he never felt the spark between them. Then he met Marissa. When he said that, I could feel my insides tingling. I was so surprised I couldn't move. My dad told me that Marissa sparked a flame in him that he didn't know he had. He was really happy with her. Before he knew it, he caught feelings, and before he could navigate his way through rights and wrongs, he got Marissa pregnant too. Then he told Marissa it was wrong, but it was too late. She was pregnant. He told her to wait, but Marissa felt insecure and came to our house. She told Mom everything. Mom confronted Dad, and he accepted it. It was a very ugly episode because Mom was extremely hurt, but even then she was polite and asked Dad for a divorce. My parents divorced because Dad had an affair with my stepmom and got her pregnant. I don't know how worse this man could get. Dad took a pause and looked over at me. He said that he'd spent a nice year with Marissa when Mom died and he had to bring me home. Marissa hated everything about it. She was insecure that he might have felt guilty and prioritized me over their baby, so he sent me away to boarding school 3 years later. I never had to stay home long enough to cause Marissa any discomfort. Love makes you do stupid things, he said. I wanted to punch this man in the face, but I controlled it. I turned around to see Marissa standing in the doorway with a water bottle in hand. She said she was just leaving for yoga class and put her bottle on the table and went. In the kitchen, I blinked, and before I could think straight, she was back and gone through the door. I was numb, so I followed her out. I picked up her water bottle to return it to her, but by the time I got out, she'd already gotten in her car and was driving off. I needed a drive to clear my mind, so I quietly sat in my car and drove, following her. She parked outside a yoga club and got out. She looked around, then started walking into an alley. She looked around and got into another car. She hugged and kissed the driver, and they drove off. I blinked a few times and parked my car. I got out and went inside the yoga club. I asked them about Marissa checking in, but they denied giving me personal info. I said I was worried about her and insisted I was at least told if she were there. They told me they had no client with that name. I got back to my car and waited. I don't know what happened next. I was so shaken up that I started making a video. A man got out of the other car and opened her door for her. He hugged her and kissed her, then slapped her but as she joyously made her way to the parking lot. So much for Yoga Marissa. Before she could get to the parking lot, I left. My dad cheated on my mom, and now he's getting cheated on. Karma. My dad has called me a few times, but I didn't pick up. I'm going to go and ask Marissa about it. Should I give you an update? Hey everyone, this is probably going to be the last update I make. I know it's a week late, but so much has happened this week. First, I actually managed to go and confront Marissa. I went when Dad wasn't home and Ash was asleep. I asked her if she had a yoga class that day. She said she had it every day, even on Sundays when she was in the kitchen cooking pasta. I asked her who her yoga instructor was. She gave me a random name. I asked her if that were a dude. She said no and laughed. Why would I take a boy? She said I was mistaken, but her voice was cut off. The guard and her hands weren't stirring the pasta sauce anymore. I told her I joined the club yesterday, and that's what they told me. She asked me how I knew where her club was. I told her I followed her the last time I'd visited. She dropped a spoon. I picked it up and she turned around. What are you getting at? She asked. I told her what I saw. She denied it as expected. I said I saw it with my own eyes. She just shrugged and told me my dad would never believe me. I pulled out my phone and played the video, and I told her that he'd believe his own eyes, at least. She stood there in shock for a minute. Then her expression calmed down, and she kept on cooking pasta. She said it didn't matter anymore, that she was already planning for a divorce anyway. My eyes widened. This woman was despicable. I mean, granted, my dad deserved all of it, but man. She told me that the guy she goes to meet at the club is her lover of 3 years now. They got back together when it was safe to do so. She said they'd fallen in love long ago, but at that time he was married to another woman whose father had hired him in his company. A lot was at stake, but Marissa and her lover decided that he would choose to keep his marriage and settle his finances. Then he divorced his wife and he got together, but Marissa got pregnant. She wanted to settle down with someone, so she decided to stick with her current partner. They were seeing each other on and off, but then Marissa met her lover and got pregnant. She chose to stay with her current partner and told him he had to do something about it. He got cold feet, so she had to take it into her own hands. That's when she spoke to Mom's new boyfriend is a widower and owns a company. She's ready to go. She said women need to do what they can. Kid and turned around with a smile, but her smile froze as she looked over my shoulder. Her smile was gone in the next moment. I turned around to find Dad in the doorway, fists balled and eyes red. He was shaking. Well, then Dad woke Ash up and brought her to the kitchen. He asked her who her father was. I looked over at Marissa and shook my head. I told him that she'd always known him to be her dad, and that she didn't care about blood relations. Over the next 2 days, Marissa and Ash were asked to leave his house. The divorce is in process, and Ash and Marissa are staying at a shelter. My dad has asked me to find him a therapist, and he's apologized a lot since I've forgiven him. He's denying any contact with Marissa, who he didn't take in. I have proof, and Marissa has begged me for it. She's even asked me to think of Ash in her pregnancy. What can I say? Marissa, this is your problem. What should I do? Delete the video or hand it over? We'll update in the comments at some point. Thanks for being with me for the suggestions and support. It means a lot.